Hello, and welcome to Ars Biblica, the art of the Bible. I'm your host, Stephen Finley, and together with pastor, teacher, and scholar Jeffrey Ernestine, we're going to be looking at these ancient texts as creative expression and discussing the many ways that this book has influenced our modern world. Welcome, Jeffrey.
Hey, Steve. Thanks for having me.
You're more than welcome. Thanks for being here. So, it's a huge subject.
Very huge.
Well, we're looking at a book that, regardless of your
Religious proclivities?
religious proclivities, that's a very good way to say it. Regardless of that, this book is incredibly influential in so many ways.
Oh, absolutely. It's foundational to the Western canon. It has shaped literature for 2,000 years. It is itself an outpouring of human creativity, a massive act of creativity.
And it's really a collection of books.
Yeah, the thing you have to remember is that the word Bible, we sometimes say it means book. Actually, it doesn't mean book. It means library. And the Bible itself is an anthology, and then there are parts of the Bible that are anthologies within anthologies. So
there's numerous genres of literature in the
oh
anthology.
yeah. So yeah, there's history, there's essay, there's treatises, there's law, but as you and I've discussed more than once, somewhere between a quarter and a third of the Bible, and that's a conservative estimate, is poetry. It's just poetic expression. The Psalms are all poetry, most of the prophets poetry, and even the texts that are prose have bits and pieces of poetry just embedded in them, and have poetic expressions built into them.
And of course, the largest book in the Bible is Psalms, and it's nothing but poetry.
Yeah, and, it's the largest by chapter count. The actual largest by word count is Jeremiah,
Okay.
but even it is in large measure poetic. In the modern world, we have this idea about poetry that it's one of two things: that either it's frivolous, kind of an extra, like art or music, right? Well, if we can fund it and we have somebody to teach it, we'll do it as an extra. It'll be one of those things we do after school, right? But it's frivolous, and so then we don't need to take it seriously. Or we'll think of poetry as being sort of impenetrable. That the sort of T.S. Eliot stuff that is very difficult to understand, very difficult to parse, and so not really anything anyone can understand. But the reality is that in the ancient world, not just in the world of the Bible, but in the ancient world generally, you think about the ancient Greeks or the ancient Romans or the ancient peoples of the Middle East. If you wanted to communicate something, if you wanted to make it to where everyone would care about it, if you thought it was important, you were more likely to turn it into poetry. And for a couple of reasons. First of all, because if you make it poetry, it makes it easier to remember. It's vivid. There are rhythmic tricks built into it that aid recall. But then also, it creates this sense of weight. Someone has crafted this, someone spent time on it, that it didn't just flow out of their mouth in a kind of first draft. And so then there is this idea that if you're going to communicate your culture's values, whatever those values might be, you're going to do it in poetry. So you think even just the ancient Greeks. The foundational texts of their civilization were the Iliad and the Odyssey, poetry. Alexander the Great, when he traveled, kept a copy of the Iliad by his bed the way you or I might keep a Bible, because it was how he recalled himself to his values. And that was how ancient cultures conceived of poetry. Poetry was the most important thing.
So the fact that there is so much poetry included in the Bible is part and parcel of that ancient world mentality about things of meaning.
Oh, 100%. That's just how you did it. And it was considered to be what reasonably intelligent, manly men, for instance, did. You know, the poet who wrote is credited with having written at about half of the Psalms is David.
Right.
And he was a king, he was a soldier, he was a statesman, and a poet. That was what he did. And if you had a group of people who were having a celebration, we've come back from war and we're having a feast, what do you do for entertainment? Get a poet in here. Get someone with a harp in here to do some poetry for us. And that was how the ancient world conceived of the centrality of poetry.
And you know, and I know from my study of Shakespeare that you didn't go to see a play in Shakespeare's day. You went to go hear a play. And that poetry itself as a form is meant to be heard.
When a group of people got together to study the Bible, it was declaimed, it was read out loud, it was performed almost. You thought of yourself as fortunate, for instance, if you, in your town, the rabbi was good at reading scripture.
Right.
And could do it well.
Right.
And so you would go to synagogue to hear the rabbi read the scriptures well. And that worked alongside of a culture of memory that valued the ability to hear something and remember it. You know, you read the dialogues of Plato, for instance, and in that the expectation is you heard something and you'll be able to repeat it back to me.
Right.
And so in the dialogues, we might be talking and someone would say, oh, I heard so-and-so say the other day, and just recite from memory what he said. So in the ancient world, you would go and hear the scriptures read, performed, and then you would come away from that with it in your head, and then during the week you would rehearse it. You would recite it to yourself.
It's interesting that you say performed, because not only is about 30% of this collection poetry, but there's also 2 play scripts
There are,
involved.
yes, absolutely.
You know, so there's a kind of a larger category of poetic or creative writings, and that's going to be the focus of this series of conversations. We're just going to start, clearly if it's 30% of the Bible, there's plenty of material there for us to look at.
Absolutely.
So let me throw a question out there.
All right.
And that is, since we're looking at a large portion of the Bible whose writings are creative in nature, what can we infer about the nature of God because of this huge, seemingly, emphasis on the creative expression of people?
So there's an old idea, and this is not in any way original here at this table, that God is an artist, and that what he does is do art. Now, also science and mathematics, etc. You know, there's a saying that was attributed to Plato that God eternally geometrizes, that he's always doing geometry, so to speak, right? Yeah. But the idea was that God himself is creative. I mean, that's the fundamental text at the beginning. In the beginning, God created.
Right.
The first act that we hear God being described as performing is creativity. And that, I think, is really important, that the first act of God in the text isn't conquest or love-making, but if you conceive of the world as a piece of art that God created, well, then that's a very different story that you're telling yourself. And when you go out into the world, you're going to conduct yourself in a very different way.
Right.
Because if then God is creative, what is he creating? And you look around and what you see then is beauty instead of, monster entrails.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the idea that in artistic creativity, nothing is random.
Exactly.
It's intentional. Well, they're crafting that for a purpose, and that we're meant to see it as intentional. I think that's. It tells us something about how God values the artistic enterprise.
Well, yes, and in particular, the text, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was formless and void, darkness was over the surface of the deep, the Spirit of God moving over the surface of the waters, and God said that the idea that the craftsmanship of God is spoken.
That's right.
So that there's this idea almost that the universe itself is a kind of poetry. And if you have the idea that you live inside of a poem, you're gonna stand a little different in the world.
Right.
If you have the idea that you are yourself a piece of God's creativity. There's a New Testament idea that's sort of nested in that as well. The Apostle Paul at one point uses a Greek word. We translate it usually, you are God's workmanship, but the word is poema.
Oh, wow. You are God's poem.
Almost. I mean, it's a little bit the etymological fallacy, but yes, there is this idea.
You are in some sense wrought and carefully so.
Yeah, you are God's careful creativity.
Right.
Would be the word. And so you think of yourself differently. And then also there is this idea that we talk about a lot, the idea of the imago Dei, that you are created in the image of God. Well, if the fundamental act of God that we first see him do before he does anything else is create, then whatever else, guess what you are? You are meant to be creative.
Yeah.
That part of what God does is set you loose in the poem that is the universe to do your own part in it. To play your part in the play, to change the metaphor a little bit. And he delights to watch you, this is the word, co-create.
Yeah.
In fact, when we do art, specifically, and this is a Tolkienian idea, Professor Tolkien liked to call what he was doing when he was creating his Middle-earth legendarium, he liked to refer to it as subcreation. He said that when you do that kind of artistry, you are creating subcreating. You are creating under the creativity of God.
I want to ask you about a piece of scripture now.
Okay.
And it's one of the most famous lines in the Bible. And it's the first verse of the book of John.
Yeah.
John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God.
And see, that idea that John is working with there, first of all, if you know your Hebrew scriptures, you are unavoidably catapulted back to Genesis 1:1. Because it's the same first line, in the beginning.
Right.
And then in that story, God creates by speaking. In the beginning was the Word, right? He talks the universe into existence. But the idea that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, has this kind of power to it. Because you and I, we try to be, as we would say, true to our word, right? We try to be such that I am as good as my word, right? But we're human beings. We're flawed. We don't always mean what we say. We don't always do what we say. But the idea is that when God speaks, in some way that speech act is God putting all of himself into it, so to speak, so that and
It's the ultimate authenticity.
yes, and radically so. And then you think about it like an artist. If you are looking at a canvas, or you're reading a poem and you say that the artist put a lot of himself into it,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Well, the idea is that God put 100% of himself into it.
Right.
That the universe is an accurate reflection of the character of God, the universe as created. And that we ourselves, that's that idea of the Imago Dei, that we are created in the image of God. So that if you want to know what God looks like, look at human beings. Now, not human beings at their worst, but human beings at their best is the idea. But there's also then this idea, because the Greek word that's translated there in the beginning was the word. The word is logos. Greek had more than one word for word. And the idea of logos is not just a word like I'm going to say this to you, or I'm going to read a single word off the page. But you know this because it's the unit that's behind all of our ologies, right?
Right.
Logos, biology, right? Or anthropologos, anthropology. It's the idea is that it's meaning. It's idea. So you could almost translate that in the beginning was meaning, or meaningfulness. The idea that God is a source of meaningfulness, the ultimate source
Right.
of meaningfulness.
And this is an idea that's echoed over and over again in Scripture. Particularly, we've been talking about one of the discussions we will eventually come around to is our discussion of the book of Ecclesiastes.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Which
is a story. It's a philosophical treatise, really, of meaning.
Right.
And its absence. Basically, the writer of Ecclesiastes asks the question, is there meaning to be found under the sun? Which means in the created order, absent God.
In the material world.
In the material world. And he tries various things. He tries experiments. It's a experimental philosophy. And he says, no, there's not any. And meaning is not to be found here in the material universe. You know, the idea that we can create our own meaning, that we can come up with our own values, is that's an idea that's abroad in the world. But just try it. You know, try it for a fortnight. See
Right.
how you do.
Right.
Creating your own values. You're going to wake up in a state of some exhaustion, I think, because you can't. But the idea is that once you, so to speak, allow God back into the picture,
Right.
then suddenly everything has meaning.
Right.
Suddenly there's meaning overflowing.
Very quickly before we end, because we're going to run out of time, and this is why this is going to be a series of conversations, right?
Right.
There's a passage in Exodus where God says of a workman, Exodus 31, 3 through 5. I filled him with the Spirit of God, giving him great wisdom, intelligence, and skill in all kinds of crafts. He is able to create beautiful objects out of gold, silver, and bronze. He is skilled in cutting and setting gemstones and in carving wood. Yes, he's a master of every art. It seems to me that allowing that much time to praise art, beauty, and creative expression also gives us some insight into what the Father's all about, and kind of is the launching place for the rest of these conversations about the biblical art of poetry.
It's from the passage where they're building the tabernacle.
That's correct.
And he's praising one of the artists that's going to be sort of overseeing that endeavor. And one of the things I find fascinating about that is that we get in the church very kind of excited about the idea of what we call spiritual gifts, right? And you'll read the list in
Right.
1 Corinthians 12 of the spiritual gifts, right? And we read that as though that's an exhaustive list. It's not. It's not. And one of the spiritual gifts is this Old Testament spiritual gift of creativity,
Right.
right? We are created in the image of God, so everyone is meant to be creative in some sense. But there are people who are uniquely empowered to do art in the service of the worship of God.
And that's exactly what we're going to be looking at. Fantastic. Well, Jeffrey, we're out of time for this conversation. Many thanks to Pastor Jeffrey Ernest of Houston's Second Christian Church, and thanks for joining us here at Ars Biblica, the Art of the Bible. We wish you blessings and knowledge for all your days.
Absolutely.